We can start. Checking with the team. Are we ready to go?
Yes. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me and the National Women's Business Council to discover and discuss findings of our new research report, Engineering Change, a Blueprint for Strengthening Women's STEM Entrepreneurship. My name is Seema Lajvardian, and I have the honor to serve as chair of NWBC. I am also a small business owner and an attorney. The National Women's Business Council was created in 1988 when Congress enacted H.R. 5050, the Women's Business Ownership Act. We are a federal advisory committee and charged with monitoring developments that impact women's innovators, ensuring robust data collection about women-owned businesses, and providing policy recommendations to the President, Congress, and the SBA to advance women's entrepreneurships and ownerships. At the end of each year, we share our learnings and recommendations in an annual report. We will soon release that annual report 2024, which is a very important document, and I really encourage you to look out for it and use it as reference and support for your advocacy and educational effort. NWBC's interest in promoting women advancement in STEM fields is long-standing and grows from the importance to the economy of STEM industries and innovations. That importance is strongly reflected, for example, the remarkable $1.5 trillion in designated federal support for advanced manufacturers, scientific research and development, and infrastructure and climate adaptation in Invest in America legislation. According to Pew Research Center, median earnings for those in STEM industries are 2/3 greater than the median earnings of those outside of STEM. But census statistics show that women make up just 27% of STEM workers, despite making nearly half of the workforce. Although women earn the majority of bachelor degrees, they earned only 24% of degrees in engineering, 21% in computer science, and 24% in physics. Diminishing disparities in participation in STEM and STEM adjacent fields and increasing women's STEM business ownership would benefit all of us. As of the beginning of this year, business owned by women represented 39.1% of all businesses, employing over 12 million people and generating 2.7 trillion in revenues. If we were able to maximize the impact of women-owned businesses and have women be the same as men, average revenues, it would add 7.9 trillion to the economy. The research results we're presenting here today will improve our understandings of factors that support and impede women's STEM entrepreneurships. Policymakers, advocates, and business owners can leverage this knowledge to identify interventions likely to have the greatest positive impact on women in STEM. I am so grateful for our council members, colleagues in the women's research community, business owners and associations in our network, and government and private stakeholders for sharing and engaging in dialogue with us throughout the year. Your ideas and experiences are the building blocks of our thought leadership. I am so looking forward to this conversation and so happy to introduce NWBC's Executive Director, Tene Dolphin, to share some welcoming thoughts.
Thank you, Seema. Hey, everybody. As Seema noted, I serve as NWBC's Executive Director, and I am proud to work with a talented and visionary group of council members as well as dedicated staff. NWBC launched this present effort to dig deeper into women in STEM industries back in 2023. While we were inspired by positives like the economic trends and data that have driven investment in scientific and technical research, development, and production, we also remain concerned about gender, racial, ethnic, and other disparities in participation and ownership in these fields. For example, original research published in the journal Nature earlier this year found that women accounted for about 10.1% of people receiving AI-related patents in 1995. By 2020, their share had only increased to 12.6%. We wanted to know why imbalances like these existed, where they did and did not exist, and all in an effort to inform strategies to eliminate them. While launching this project, we've shared a literature review and convened experts to discuss these issues like the leaky pipeline in STEM entrepreneurship, as well as the opportunities to grow through Invest in America funded programs. There are many highlights and lowlights of what we've learned in the process. For example, although women are underrepresented in STEM in the workforce and among STEM business owners, women of color, younger women, and women starting non-employer businesses are closing ground toward parity with men. Women-owned firms are performing well and compare favorably to peer companies and leverage. In fact, women-owned firms generate over twice as much per dollar invested as their male counterparts. If the gender gap in entrepreneurship closed, global GDP would increase by 3 to 6%. Next slide, please. However, on the ground, women still experience more negative assumptions and rejections from financial decision makers. Women should not be left waiting in the wings for opportunities, nor should any stakeholder, including equity funders and banks and government and corporate buyers, be able to say, we couldn't find her, when they're looking for innovators to support and grow. Although we have much work ahead of us to unlock women's potential as STEM entrepreneurs, I am energized by seeing this project come to fruition and by being here today to share the results with you. I'm looking forward to gathering intelligence that helps us draft and craft actionable recommendations from the insights we're here to share. Now, let's get to the good stuff. Please join me in welcoming Councilmember Selena Rogers-Dickerson to moderate today's program. Councilmember Rogers-Dickerson is a civil engineer, project manager, and entrepreneur based in Birmingham, Alabama. She grew her firm from a one-person operation into a team, winning a number of awards along the way, including the Alabama Department of Transportation's DBE Consultant of the Year and the AG Gaston Minority Women-Owned Emerging Business of the Year. So I'm turning it over to you, Councilmember Rogers-Dickerson. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for that introduction. Good morning. My name is Selena Rogers-Dickerson. I am president and founder of Sarkor LLC and Celine LLC. I have the pleasure of sitting on the National Women's Business Council along with Seema and 11 more dynamic leaders. As a STEM entrepreneur myself, today's program holds a lot of personal meaning and importance to me. It is indispensable that we weigh lived experience like mine and those of our speakers today, and so many other women who've walked the walk when we think about how to change systems and habits to include people who have always been missing from these industries. We also need the insight we gain when we consider all our experiences in the aggregate, and produce data-driven analysis like the results we are presenting today. In a moment, the lead researcher responsible for this project, Dr. Kajal Kapoor, will share an overview of her national level findings. After her presentation, I'll moderate a conversation with women with deep and diverse experience in the STEM entrepreneurship industries. Our speakers today are Dr. Kapoor, Lakeisha Greenway, founder and CEO of Wearable Tech Ventures, and Michelle Milden, CEO of Code Rising. Dr. Kajal Kapoor is principal of Kapoor Energy Environmental Economics, LLC. She received her PhD in economics from Cornell University and has consulted on energy, environment, and economic issues for 30 years. Her work has included presenting testimony before state regulatory commissions and directing settlement processes for the approval of private programs and environmental compliance plans. In addition to these responsibilities, she has served as a reviewer for a prestigious international energy journal and as chair of the Virginia State Air Pollution Control Board. Lakeisha Greenway is a global innovation leader. As the founder and CEO of Wearable Tech Ventures, an ecosystem dedicated to the development and promotion of wearable technology and the focus of non-traditional founders, she is leading a charge to support 100 wearable startups by 2030. That's amazing. And features startups as host of Wearable Takeover podcast. Lakeisha has grown the Baltimore-based organization to representation in 4 continents and hosts the world's largest wearable innovation challenge. Organizations such as U.S. government agencies and large corporations rely on her expertise in artificial intelligence for product development and ethics considerations. Michelle Milden is the CEO of Code Rising, a transformative STEM-focused workforce preparation program dedicated to empowering underserved students. She is an accomplished attorney and leader who served as an advisor to President Obama, as well as an attorney with the Department of Justice and the U.S. House Judiciary Committee. In these and other roles, Michelle has driven impactful technology, education, and civil rights policies across government and private sectors. She is currently pursuing her Master's of Theological Studies degree at Harvard Divinity School, drawn on past experience as a youth pastor and minister. And now I would like to turn the program over to Dr. Kapoor.
Hello, Ms. Dickerson. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm going to spend a few minutes today talking about the research we did and what were our findings. Next slide, please. So the first thing I'm going to do is to talk about the definitions so that we understand what the research was about. And the next slide will show you what some of these definitions are. So this research is focused on high yield and high growth industries. High yield industries are science, technology, engineering, and mathematics industries, which yield substantial profits. High growth industries are STEM adjacent industries like architectural industries, construction, infrastructure, supply chain, sustainability, and other industries that are growing rapidly, but do not generate such profits as high yield industries. And women in STEM are female entrepreneurs in both these high yield and high growth industries. And patentees, as you're all aware, is someone who owns a patent. And next, is the North American Industry Classification System. Next slide, please. So you've already heard quite a bit about the background and introduction, so I'm not going to go over it too much. I will focus on the results, but just a brief overview. We know there's large investments in manufacturing industries, sustainability industries, infrastructure, via the bipartisan CHIPS and IRA acts. And the aim is to also invest in underserved communities. And the National Women's Business Council wants women to take advantage of these and future opportunities in STEM. However, they found that women face challenges in these sectors, and so they commissioned this research. The first phase of this research has already been talked about, which was the literature survey, a point-in-time analysis that was for 2019, policy recommendations based on that. But I'm going to focus on the second phase of this research, which is the subject of our conversation today. Next slide, please. So the second phase, what we did was to expand our data set. We went from 2012 to 2020, and we looked at census data both at the national and state levels. We looked at what the women in STEM numbers were from 2012 to 2020. And then we also gathered information on factors that could influence these numbers, such as the number of patentees, funding, female STEM graduates, labor force, real per capita incomes, and then also how COVID-19 or the pandemic influenced female STEM entrepreneurship. We performed an econometric analysis based on log-log models. And we tried to come up with further policy inferences in the second phase based on the fact that we now had more data, not just for 2019, which was in the first literature review and data analysis, but more data than that in the second phase. Next slide, please. So few of the national level findings, and I'm going to go over these quickly. You'll see how they become important when I actually talk about the national results. So female STEM entrepreneurs are concentrated in the professional services and healthcare sectors. Now, a couple of facts that are important to note. Between 2012 and 2020, the number of female patentees increased approximately twofold. So maybe 1.8 times to be more exact, but they went up, and the total investment in female-founded and co-founded firms went up almost 4 times. So just please keep this at the back of your mind as I talk about the other national results. Next slide, please. Now, here are the actual results, and what you're seeing here in front of you is on the top, you will see the different factors that I mentioned before, the patentees, the venture funding, labor force, STEM graduates, interest rates, per capita incomes, and COVID-19. And we are trying to see if these factors go up by 1% or 1 percentage point, what is the impact on the nation as a whole and in some of the racial and ethnic categories based on these changes. So I'll just go over the national level numbers first and then compare them to some of the racial and ethnic categories to show you the differences. 1% increase in female patentees leads to a 0.56% increase for the nation as a whole. For venture funding, the increase is 0.29%, national labor force, 37%, and then you see with an increase in women STEM graduates, it's actually close to a 10% decline. Increases in interest rates of 1 percentage point bring about a slight decrease of 0.08%, and then increases in real per capita incomes, it's a negative 3% increase. Now let's compare it to some of the racial and ethnic categories. If you look at the Black or African American and Hispanic groups, you'll see that their percentages in response to patentees and venture funding is almost 3 times that of the nation as a whole. So they are very highly sensitive to increases in female patentee numbers and venture funding numbers. With labor force as well, you see large increases. I'll explain the large labor force increases as we go along. And then they are also highly negatively sensitive to female STEM graduate numbers and to per capita incomes. Interest rates don't influence these entrepreneurs much because they're not very dependent on traditional financing. So what are some characteristics of Black or Hispanic female STEM entrepreneurs? Well, they are concentrated in the professional and healthcare sectors. They don't rely a lot on traditional funding and financing. So for Black female firms, the funding is almost, venture funding is less than 1%. As a result, when interest rates change, they don't see much of an impact because they're not very dependent on traditional financing. And during COVID-19, they were at a disadvantage in terms of getting pandemic funding, but because they are concentrated in the healthcare sector, they could take advantage of those opportunities, and you see the increases. Similarly, for the Asian firms, you can see the trends are very similar to Black or Hispanic categories. I'm spending a bit of time on Black or Hispanic categories, but because I want to take you a little bit even beyond what the report necessarily says. There has been recent literature, there's Wells Fargo, American Express, and others that have shown a surge in Black and Hispanic female entrepreneurship. And although our study is focused on STEM, not all of entrepreneurship as a whole, you can see how sensitive they are to female patentee numbers and funding. And then if you remember back in a previous slide, I had mentioned the increases in female patentees and funding levels, and that could have contributed some to the surges that you see. And just very quickly, the American Indian and Native Hawaiian categories, you can see that the percentages are very large in their cases, but that's because we started with a very small base number for them. And so if there were any changes in numbers, it led to large increases in percentages. Next slide, please. So I know I showed you the magnitudes, but really what does this all mean in terms of policy interpretations, in terms of inferences? And for that, I'd like you to focus on this slide, which really is a whole bunch of arrows. What these arrows are saying is that if you increase patentees, funding, and labor force, you see increases in female STEM entrepreneurs, with increases in women STEM grads and per capita incomes, you see decline. I'm not going to focus on interest rates because the movement because of them is so small. And then COVID-19, we saw increases in their entrepreneurship. So what's really going on? Well, increases in female patentees leading to increases in female STEM numbers means that probably they are able to translate or to transition into entrepreneurship fairly easily. The funding is probably going to both concentrated sectors like professional services and healthcare. To ease some of the competition, it's probably also going to non-concentrated sectors, which means new businesses. The national labor force, you're seeing increases because of the increased networking opportunities and childcare options due to a large labor force. The increases in women STEM graduates leading to declines could be because maybe female STEM graduates are not able to commercialize their ideas fairly easily, and also maybe that makes them persist in academia. Increases in per capita incomes could mean that female STEM entrepreneurs are taking more advantage of the jobs being offered. They're seizing those opportunities because of the opportunity cost of going into entrepreneurship, and they could also be spending more time raising their families. So these are the inferences. Now, what does this mean in terms of policy implications? Well, the federal government should try to increase the number of female patentees to bring about positive changes in female STEM entrepreneurship. How can this be done? This can be done by partnering with institutions to make sure that female STEM faculty and students get increased exposure to commercialization and entrepreneurship. It can be done by cooperating with states to set up commercialization authorities, which in turn encourage institutions to expose female students and faculty to commercialization. Increases in venture funding, they can be brought about by SBA training lenders and financiers and capitalists on increasing funding to female STEM entrepreneurs, and also increasing this funding not just to women in concentrated sectors, but also the non-concentrated sectors that are outside of professional services and healthcare. Increases in the national labor force. Well, childcare stabilization grants that could bring about increases in childcare options for women. Investing in K-12 education could bring about a larger skilled STEM workforce for these women. So that those can be policy solutions. As far as women STEM graduates goes, you remember I had mentioned that they are probably not able to translate or transition into entrepreneurship that easily, and institutions could be incentivized, for example, in grant applications to include more diverse faculty to help women commercialize and become entrepreneurs. And then as far as per capita incomes go, we saw there's a decline if there's an increase in per capita incomes. And providing more childcare options, childcare stabilization grants that I had mentioned before could alleviate all of that. And then as far as shocks to the economy or pandemics go, providing emergency assistance through community organizations, new opportunities for women entrepreneurs through digital solutions or other e-commerce solutions, providing direct support to families will also help women start new businesses. All of these, plus SBA providing application assistance to women so they can seize these opportunities, are all policy solutions that the government can adopt. Next slide, please. And I've already gone through these, so I'm just gonna say that I talked about female patentees transitioning, venture capital going to female STEM firms, labor force increases. One thing I wanted to point out, which I had promised you earlier, that the large labor force response is because of the large base for the national labor force. So if you have 150 million people, even if you increase by 1%, that is 1.5 million more people in the labor force. And that's why you see those large percentages and interest rates we talked about. Next slide, please. I talked about STEM education being a pipeline to academia. Women STEM graduates could be gravitating towards crowded sectors, leading to increased competition and firm failures. So you have to provide them the diversity of STEM education in institutions. We talked about raising families. the pandemic creating new opportunities, and direct cash payments, pandemic funding, all of these, and pandemic funding through community organizations leading to greater entrepreneurship. Next slide, please. And then, of course, with all of this, you'll get increased female commercialization, innovation, greater financial health of female STEM entrepreneurs, childcare options and skilled workforce options, and greater resiliency for the economy during shocks to the system. Next slide, please. And all of this is going to lead to greater societal innovation, entrepreneurship, resilience. You will have a society that becomes more solution-focused rather than problem-focused, greater wealth, and also a futuristic society that looks towards future solutions that have not been adopted as of yet, or in our minds, whose time has not come yet, but there are these innovations that society as a whole can take advantage of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kapoor. We have lots of information to think about and to discuss. So I'm going to jump right into the questions. Lakeisha and Michelle, will you please join us? Thank you, ladies. And so, we're going to take about a minute each. And if you could, Lakeisha and Michelle, could you tell us more about your experiences as a STEM entrepreneur and supporter of STEM entrepreneurs? What's different or distinctive about the space for women and women of color in particular?
I can start. So again, Lakeisha Greenwade, founder and CEO of Wearable Tech Ventures, where we develop and promote wearable technology. And in those cases of wearable technology, it covers everything from med tech to emerging technology in the gaming, VR systems, fashion tech, sports tech, etc. What's interesting is that earlier this year, or I should say late last year, we were listening to a number of our female STEM founders who had obtained their PhD or were on the track to obtain their PhD. And we were able to understand some of the challenges that they were facing from the standpoint of where they lie as in ownership from a patent perspective, and what challenges they were going to be facing from an ownership perspective if they try to transition to entrepreneurship. And we produced a webinar that is still active on our website today at wearabletechventures.org, where we discuss some of those challenges and some possible solutions around that. And I think that that discussion is key when we look at some of the dismal numbers that when we look at the increase overall of female representation in academia and with patentees, but with the dismal translation to that of wealth. On the other side, from a talent perspective and a talent pipeline perspective, we focus on youth as well as non-traditional talent through programming that we produce throughout the year to expose folks to various facets of technology from the standpoint of encouraging entrepreneurship, providing opportunities to leverage that into academia as well as a student, and or to leverage that expertise to one of our startups. So overall, that's kind of the perspective I'm going to bring today, and I'm honored to be here to share what we've been doing and hopefully how we can help overall change the overall impact of this report.
That was fantastic, Lakeisha. It's kind of hard going after someone who is just as accomplished and incredible like Lakeisha, but I definitely am grateful for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation and to even be able to weigh into the fascinating outcomes of the research that the National Women's Business Council has done and Dr. Kapoor's incredible presentation. Just a quick kind of like answer to that wonderful question about just our experiences and kind of what distinguished place that women and women of color serve in this space. I began my journey in STEM serving in the Obama White House, where I worked as an attorney and advisor. And I was specifically overseeing some of the administration's work and engagement with the House Space and Science Technology Committee. And through that lens, my expertise as a lawyer is in civil rights and human rights, but being able to witness really the president's leadership in STEM initiatives, especially those that benefited women, really kind of inspired my call and commitment to fostering economic resilience through for historically marginalized communities through STEM advancement. I'm also a current student here at Harvard Divinity School, so using kind of theoretical approaches to this work is really essential for me. And I think what women bring to STEM is really the vantage point and experience to be able to see through some of these patriarchal racial barriers that do exist in STEM. I think the professor, author, and educator and social critic Bell Hooks, whose perspective on education as a practice for freedom, I highlight Bell Hooks to challenge kind of how we all look at our approaches to disrupting these barriers in STEM. At Code Rising, we work towards belonging and identity in STEM for every student. So we center on the voices of the most marginalized, which includes women and women of color. And this sounds like more philosophical here, but I want to underscore for the call today how important it is that women are recognized for the fostering of spaces that we create where education liberates and opportunities in STEM liberates rather than confines. And using Bell Hooks kind of as a focal point, I believe that approach kind of recognizes the challenges and systemic inequities that kind of persist in STEM fields. But I feel fortunate to take those experiences in the legislative and executive branch and translate those into effectuating change in entrepreneurship and at the local level with Code Rising. Code Rising is a not-for-profit 501c3. We focus on eliminating those barriers in STEM education for underserved communities with our primary focus on computer science education. But for example, we have created bilingual and culturally responsive programs that engage students in AI and robotics and cybersecurity. And I believe just as women entrepreneurs, we can really see these experiences and reveal those distinct challenges that exist in STEM, especially for the underrepresentation to access. But what we focus on is ensuring that that underrepresentation doesn't impact access to, example, to mentorship in other places. But we found that fostering curiosity and confidence through early exposure and hands-on learning can ignite that passion for STEM. But I wanted to make sure at the top of these remarks, I brought in that philosophical piece, because I do think one of the unique things that we bring to this space in entrepreneurship is that ability to create those spaces that liberate for women to innovate rather than confine. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. So this question is for all three of you, Dr. Kapur, Lakeisha, and Michelle. Increasingly, women are succeeding in STEM classrooms and laboratories, but not translating that success into private sector commercialization and ownership at the same rate as men. Dr. Kapur, your studies kind of touch on that. In the past conversations, NWBC has hosted participants have recommended greater interdisciplinary collaboration in higher education contexts and intentional investment. Again, focusing on intentional investment and representative mentorship. What do you think are keys to unlocking the entrepreneurial potential of women with strong STEM credentials? About a minute or so each for that. Thank you.
I'll start, and again, going back to some of our female founders that have extensive STEM background and experience in education. One thing we did was we took some time to just ask questions and try to understand what their journey was. And we found there were a number of gaps in their educational journey that translates to entrepreneurship where it didn't equate to a win. And when we say win, what does that mean? Actual ownership in something that they can leverage to produce wealth. And so again, going back to that patent piece, a lot of phenomenal women in STEM that want to translate to entrepreneurship have challenges when it comes to that patent. And when we look at specifically at the state of Maryland, there's a strong push to fund innovations that are coming through universities. The challenge on the opposite end is how much ownership does that female innovator really have? win, you are pigeonholed by some of these systems. And for some organizations or from state organizations, it may look like a win, but to the actual innovator, it is not. It's time lost. And so that's where we've come in to advocate and to understand where our founders are and to provide those introductions early to some of our corporate and commercial partners to determine how can we influence a better outcome so that these female STEM entrepreneurs can be an actual winner and help to develop a workforce that's going to impact the state and then also help them build wealth so that we can continue the cycle.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much.
I can go next, Michelle, or would you like to?
Oh, I can happy to defer and are happy to answer either one.
Okay. I'll just quickly add to that and say that I think what you have is a situation of the possibility of converting raw talent to grant writing and contract writing skills. So connecting female STEM researchers to people who are already successful, who are grant recipients or contract recipients, connecting with them, learning the language they speak to be successful in that sphere, and then translating that into their own proposals that they write, plus being part of organizations like NSF's Aware, which helps with grant writing assistance, which helps with mentorship opportunities. I think those things are very crucial for researchers to understand. They might have the research background, but taking sort of a PhD idea and putting it into a 10-page proposal might not be something that they're very well versed in. And I think that's important. Thank you.
I would just, Selena, underscore Dr. Kapoor's point specifically about those places. And my background comes from just my legal and advising work in the federal government and legislative branch. But I really do believe that some of these theoretical approaches, though, underscore why interdisciplinary collaboration and government collaboration is essential. And kind of those insights lead to opportunities for some of the things Dr. Kapoor was saying. For example, at the federal level, the government and the Obama administration was continuing to provide like training and counseling for women entrepreneurs, equipping them with the necessary skills, not just to succeed in the private sector, but to take advantage of those opportunities that could provide even funding for businesses. I know at the state and federal level, we all know collaboration is vital, and like encouraging states to continuing on my end, what I work in is developing comprehensive strategies to improve achievement, provide rigorous curriculum to support increased participation for women and girls in STEM who will be our future entrepreneurs. And then also just underscoring the continuing fostering of open, diverse scientific community. So understanding that supporting women and STEM students and researchers is essential, not just as an American strategy to innovate, but to build for the rest of the world. These are opportunities that can provide solutions to global competitiveness, national security, and innovation. But again, kind of bringing those theoretical approaches in, like Sanjay said, epistemic decolonialization, or other ways where we look at systems that promote ideas of building and fostering equity, but really highlighting women's unique perspectives that tend to often validate even sometimes non-Western approaches to problem solving and innovation. I think that kind of inclusive thinking is really a necessity for our country.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you, ladies. And just kind of piggyback off a couple of things that you all said. I attended a conference on buying and selling companies today because it's something that we don't get enough of in STEM. We don't know what asset we're actually holding as a STEM entrepreneur and how we can leverage that asset for generational wealth. As Lakeisha said earlier, how do we create generational, and we give up so much? And in that conference, I'm not only the only woman of color, I'm the only woman in a STEM related industry that was in that room. And so taking this information that you all are presenting and then working together with other firms, I like to say that as an engineer, and the engineering part was what I was trained to do. I had to learn how to do the rest of those things. I had to learn how to team with marketing firms. I had to learn how to team with people who helped me write my proposals better, because being a great technical writer does not necessarily translate to being a great proposal writer, right? one more question, and we got literally about 30 seconds, and I'm going to pivot this to you, Lakeisha, because I have on 3 pieces of wearable technology right now, okay? And so what do you think is this disruptive or breakthrough in technologies like AI that will help or hurt progress towards women's presence in STEM and in STEM business creation in particular?
This is a wonderful question. Actually, I'm really excited about a woman-led firm out of Houston, Texas, that was named as one of Houston's most innovative companies of the year. It's called Baritone, led by Dr. Megan Pritchard, a woman of color. And so she actually developed a wearable tech sleep apnea device that debunks what you see out there on the market today. And on one of our recent episodes of our podcast, Wearable Takeover, she showed a quick sample of it, but we're really excited about what she's doing. In addition to that, we support, and when I say support, we've, since the inception of a program at the NIH, the National Institutes of Aging, is a particular bootcamp innovation program. It's been going now for about 3 years. This past year, we had 3 wearable tech companies that received $60,000 of funding. 2 of those firms were female-led. So with those partnerships, it allows us to expand that pool of mentorship, but then also going back to Dr. Kapoor's notation as it relates to proposal writing, it actually helps to those firms so that they can be successful when they go for whether you call it a SIBA or SBIR funding. It helps them on that pathway by having that vetted crowd of mentors, by having that traction, and so that they can be successful the first time versus having to write 2 or 3 proposals moving forward.
Absolutely. And if I recall, not enough women are taking advantage of the Silver Sitter funding that's out there. So if you don't know what it is, definitely Google SBIR and I think it's STTR. And so thank you all again for taking the time to share your thoughts and paying it forward by backing women in STEM. It's not enough of you out there, so every advocate counts. Key takeaways, we've touched on a lot of things, but in particular, that translation between the funding and the ownership and taking advantage of the opportunities, or just representation. If you know a woman-owned STEM entrepreneur, take them a moment to lift them up, share a post, talk about them, because we may not always be advocates for ourselves the way we need to be, and pat ourselves on the back as we rightfully deserve to be. So we are here to bridge the divide between federal policymakers and women innovators who are in the trenches of STEM entrepreneurial ecosystem. And we hope you will continue to help us fulfill that mission by staying engaged with us. I'd like to invite Tanae back to tell you more about what's next for NWBC and how to keep in touch with us. Thank you very much for your time.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Councilmember Rogers Dickerson. Thank you so much, Michelle, Lakeisha, Dr. Kapoor. That was a wonderful conversation. Anytime you throw in bell hooks, the conversation is going to be fire. And so I am just in deep gratitude to the work that's being done, the conversations that are being had. As I mentioned earlier, this report started in 2023. And it takes a while to come into fruition, but that doesn't mean the conversations stop on today. We've had this webinar, we've had this conversation, we're releasing the report. You can find the full report on our website. Just go to our website, then look under research and data, and then click engineering change, and you'll see all of this great information. But for researchers, I know that you can just access this report, but for anybody who wants to have a conversation, who wants to continue talking about the findings, let's do that. We're going to take this work and really go deep next year as the council continues to craft policy recommendations. Please join us in January, early January. We'll share the details soon for our next public meeting. In just a few weeks, our annual report will come out. This is full of our 2024 policy recommendations based on some of the the early findings that Dr. Kapoor shared. I also just want you to follow us on social media. Again, there's a wealth of information, and join our newsletter. this conversation doesn't stop. The work doesn't stop. We are fired up and ready to go. And again, we thank you for joining us today. Enjoy. Take care.